Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Grace. It is lovely to have you here as always. I am not in the habit of doing book hauls, mostly because I have some issues with the levels of consumerism in online bookish spaces, and I don't want to be a part of fueling that myself, even though I know I have been part of the problem with my own spending in recent years. However, on this one occasion, I recently left my job at a bookstore and moved to a job at a library nearby instead. So from this point onwards, I'm not going to be buying books very regularly at all. I'm going to be reading books from the library and reading books from my extensive personal collection that I already have. And if I read any books that I absolutely love, then I might buy them afterwards. But I did have a pretty decent discount when I was working at the bookstore. So as my final goodbye to that job, I did get a bit of a haul. So this is probably the only book haul you will ever see from me, unless it's like a library book haul. So enjoy it while you can. But we're gonna get into all of the books that I got as a goodbye to my bookstore job. So the first book that I got is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. I have not read anything by Robert Jackson Bennett before, but I've heard really good things, and this just sounds so enthralling to me. This is kind of a fantasy murder mystery, and I don't tend to go for murder mysteries because I'm a huge wimp, but I get the vibe from this that it's going to be a bit more on the funny end, kind of funny dark, which I'm hoping I can cope with a bit more. But the premise of this sounds so interesting. It is set in a fantasy empire, and an imperial officer has been found dead after a tree spontaneously started growing out of their body. What? That just sounds so wild to me. Anything that's kind of nature magic related and creepy in that way, I always find really enjoyable, and just the vibe from the cover of this, the amount of mushrooms on there, that's very promising. This is also meant to be quite Holmes and Watson vibe, with the Holmes figure being a woman and her assistant being a man who is kind of getting dragged along for the ride. I feel like I'm gonna really enjoy that dynamic. So I'm very excited for this one. It's a little outside of my comfort zone, but I have a good feeling about it. So that is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. The next book is one that I had absolutely no business getting, and that is Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Wurr. I have not started this series yet, so I don't know why I bought the third book. Well, I do know why. It's because I have the first two in hardback and I really wanted to make sure that the series matched on my shelves. I don't normally do this. I don't condone this, buying the whole of a series before you've even read the first one. But something just tells me so strongly that I'm going to love these books. If you don't know, the first book in this series is Gideon the Ninth, and it's meant to be a very confusing and wacky sci-fi fantasy series that has mostly just been described to me as lesbian necromancers in space, which is enough for me, really. I know very little else about it, which is how a lot of people recommend you go into it, because it's just going to confuse you anyway. But so many people have raved about these books. I'm really excited to see what the hype is about. So I had to, I'm sorry. So that is Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Wurr. The next book is A Letter to the Luminous Deep by Sylvie Cathrall. This is an underwater story of a girl called E and a boy called Henry who write letters to each other, mostly about quite scholarly things, and end up uncovering a mystery of the deep sea. But soon after this discovery, E's home is destroyed by a seaquake and both of these characters vanish. So this book ends up being the story of E's sister and Henry's brother trying to figure out what happened, where their siblings went, trying to piece together their letters and field notes and sketches to solve the mystery and learn the story of their siblings. And in doing so, they find out about their love story. Now, on the blurb here, it says perfect for fans of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and if you know me at all, you know I loved Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I still need to read the second one, don't come for me. So I feel like this will be academia vibes, but hopefully not too dark. Also, just look at that cover, it's stunning. Oh. So that is A Letter to the Luminous Deep by Sylvie Cathrall. The next book that I got was another watery one, and that is Dark Water Daughter by H.M. Long. Now I have read one other book by H.M. Long, let me grab it. Hall of Smoke. I read this several years ago now and I really enjoyed it. I had a couple of issues with the way that it ended, just for me personally, for my tastes, but generally it really hooked me and I loved the writing style of it, and the world building was really interesting as well. So my partner and I were both really interested in picking this one up. This is about a storm singer, a girl who can call on hurricanes and storms with her voice, and she's faced with servitude to a pirate lord. So in order to escape from that, she joins forces with his arch enemy. There's also another perspective in this, a disgraced naval officer who is meant to be bringing this pirate lord to justice, but also has some personal investment in taking him down as well. And both of their stories are meant to entwine as this book goes on. There's also something really interesting in here to me. Mary, the storm singer, is meant to have dreams of spectral creatures who inhabit the ancient forests of her homeland and the figureheads of ships, which sounds like such an interesting piece of world building to me. I absolutely love when a story can create its own folklore and mythology and it just sounds really unique and original, and that is something I've never heard of before. I'm sure that there is some folklore out there that is related to that, but it's new to me and it sounds cool. So that is Dark Water Daughter by H.M. Long. Another book that I got that is the next one in a series that I haven't started oh no, is The Legacy of Yangan by F.C. Lee. Now, I don't know if I've mentioned this on this channel, but I am a huge Avatar: The Last Airbender fan. It is my favourite piece of media ever. Probably my favourite story ever told. I just think it is so incredibly done. I've watched it many, many times. And to be fair, I have read the Kyoshi books, which are also by this author, so I do know that I like his writing style and I like his work within the Avatar universe, but I haven't read the other Yang Chen book yet, which comes before this one. If somehow you don't know about Avatar: The Last Airbender, in which case please go and watch the original animated series, none of the new iterations. It's the story of a world in which people can bend the four elements: fire, water, earth and air, and there is always one person, the Avatar, who can bend all four elements and also is very in touch with the spirit world of this land. And the Avatar is reincarnated, so there have been a lot of spin-offs from the original show that talk about different incarnations of the Avatar, and these books go back in time before the original series. There are the Kyoshi books, which are about Kyoshi, one reincarnation who came before Aang from the main series, and then there are the Yang Chen books, which came even before that. So I just know I'm gonna love these. I had a little bit of an issue with the second Kyoshi book. I thought the first one was a lot better, but I still enjoyed it. Anything in this world is always going to hook me and I just will read all of it. Everything that comes out that's Avatar related, although I haven't finished the new show and I refuse to. Anything bookish that's released in this world, I will be reading. And I urge you to do the same, or I urge you to go back and watch the series if you have not done so already. Please give it a try. So that is The Legacy of Yang Chen by F.C. The next book is one that I have never heard of online at all, but it came into store and I immediately thought I just have to know, and that is Magog by Jeff Noon and Steve Beard. All it took for me to know I needed to read this one was the first line on the blurb, which is a journey through the 60-mile long ghost of a dragon. So it sounds like this is set inside a giant dragon ghost. Like the world is just a giant dragon? that just sounds so incredible. That sounds like such an interesting world to set your story in, and honestly this could have been about anything, but the blurb also sounds really interesting. It's about a washed up river boat captain who in this setting used to run a steam powered boat along this river to carry people and goods, but now is just drinking herself to death in a seaside resort until these two characters, one young sick girl and one being of artificial intelligence who has a crystal skull with secrets inside, come and ask her to make one last voyage along this treacherous river through the ghost of a dragon, I guess. This just sounds, again, so original, and I'm honestly really glad that I haven't heard anything about this, because I think that going into a world that original with just no preconceptions and no spoilers at all is going to be really exciting, and piecing that puzzle together is going to be really fun. So I will let you know what I think, but I'm hoping that this will end up in an underrated gems recommendation video at some point. Fingers crossed. So that is Gog Magog by Jeff Noon and Steve Beard. The next book that I got was Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. Now, I read my first T. Kingfisher book earlier this year. I read Paladin's Grace and I really enjoyed it. I thought that her writing was hysterical. It made me laugh many times, but also really creative again. And this is a novella. It sounds so weird. This is the story of a character called Toadling who is raised by fairies. I don't know if they are a fae themselves or if they're some other kind of magical creature, but they're asked by the fae to put a blessing of protection on this one human child. And this all goes wonderfully until centuries later a knight rocks up at the tower in which this child is being protected and tries to break them free. So I guess this is kind of a Sleeping Beauty retelling, but I think it's going to be quite different. I'm just really excited to watch T. Kingfisher sink her teeth into something again and spin it in some wacky way. And the character of Toadling sounds wonderful to me. I think that I'm probably going to end up being a big T. Kingfisher fan. I'm a bit nervous to dive into her cozy horror. As I mentioned, I'm a huge wimp, but I don't know, maybe if I read enough of her stuff and absolutely love it, I'll be persuaded to give them a go. But for now, we're gonna go with just this little one, which sounds really intriguing to me. So that is Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. The next book is a children's non-fiction book. Now, I think that children's non-fiction is being so slept on. It is absolutely incredible and gorgeous these days, and so much better than when I was little. I worked on the kids' floor at the bookstore I was working at, so I got to see all of these new kids non-fiction books come in with the most gorgeous illustrations, and there's so much more freedom in children's non-fiction, where it might not necessarily be non-fiction exactly. They can take stories of mythology and fantasy but write them as if they are non-fiction. I don't know if any of you ever read the ology books growing up, but I mean something like that. The Egyptology and ghostology and dragonology books. Oh, I love the dragonology books so much. But it was written as if this lore was 100% fact about dragons existing in different parts of the world and the different species. And I just find them so interesting and so beautiful. And I also think if you're a writer, they're the perfect place to find inspiration, especially if you write fantasy stories, because you can get these little bite-sized hints of mythology and folklore and gorgeous images, and it just really sparks my creativity at least. But the book in question today is Secrets of the Vampire by Julie Legere, I think is how you say her name, and Elsa White and Laura Perez. The subtitle on this is A Supernatural Sourcebook of Our Legend and Lore. So this is written from the perspective of a vampire telling their history, but this is just so gorgeous. I mean, look at these illustrations, they're just stunning. This gives a history of vampires and their development in mythology throughout different countries and parts of the world and different times in history, up until pop culture. It even mentions Buffy the Vampire in here. I cannot wait to get to this one and learn some things, but also just soak in those vibes, that world that this creates unabashedly. And I would love to do a video on my favourite kids non-fiction books at some point. Please let me know if you would be interested in that, because I don't know if anyone cares except for me, but I really care. Also, while I was getting my partner to take the thumbnail for this video, he took this one picture, which was not flattering at all, and I immediately said, oh, it looks like this. So at least we're on theme. But that is Secrets of the Vampire. And the last book that I personally got, I have a few honourable mentions that are books that my partner wanted to get, but I'll probably end up reading myself as well. But the last book that I really wanted, I succumbed to the hype. This is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This has been popping off on TikTok. It has been absolutely everywhere, on BookTube as well recently. This is a gothic fantasy about a girl who lives in a mist-locked kingdom and has a monster in her head that she calls the Nightmare. Now this main character meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, and they end up teaming up to try to figure out how they can save this city from the magical mist that lurks around it. And they also, I think, begin to fall for each other, of course. But at the same time, the nightmare in Elspeth, the main character's head, begins to grow more powerful and take over her mind. This is a duology, and I have heard some people say that it isn't necessarily the best written thing they've ever read, but nearly everyone I've heard talk about these books have said that they've really enjoyed them regardless. And I just think that they will be really good fun and really good vibes. The misty atmosphere and the forests and the monster in your head, all of that just feels like it's gonna have such strong vibes, which is what I'm craving. So that is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. Okay, so the next three books all look pretty interesting to me, but they're not ones that I necessarily would have picked out personally, but my boyfriend has. He really wants to get to them, and I'll probably wait for him to read them first and let me know what he thinks, and then end up reading them myself, most likely. Also, if you have read any of these, please let me know, and maybe I'll get to them a bit sooner if you enjoyed them. But the first one that my partner really wanted to get was The Monsters We Defy by Leslie Penelope. This is the story of a woman who can talk to spirits, but that power has put her in debt to the spirit world. And when one particular spirit offers her freedom from this bargain if she can steal a magical ring from a very rich woman in this society, she jumps immediately at the chance. But she also puts together a team to pull off this heist, and everyone in this team seems to have some kind of magical ability. There's a jazz performer who can hypnotize people with their music, and there's an actor who can change their face. The setting in this one sounds really interesting to me. It's very much inspired. I don't know if it's actually set in the 1920s jazz age or if it's just a setting inspired by it, but either way, I haven't read a book, a fantasy story that has been inspired by that era. So I think that will be really interesting. Honestly, I think the main thing putting me off this one a little bit is that I haven't had the best experience with heist stories. And that is mostly because I didn't love Six of Crows, which always makes me nervous to say. I'm so sorry. I didn't dislike Six of Crows at all. I just didn't think it lived up to the hype for me, unfortunately. Everyone told me I would be obsessed, and I unfortunately was not. But maybe this will do for me what Six of Crows did not. Maybe this ragtag bunch of jazz age figures will be a bit more compelling for me, I'm hoping. So that is The Monsters We Defy by Leslie Penelope. The next book that my partner really wanted to get is another water-themed one. You can definitely tell that it is his favourite kind of setting, and that is Fathom Folk by Eliza Chan. This is an East Asian mythology inspired fantasy set in a half-submerged city where the humans live up in the air in aerial towers and walkways, and they look down on the sea folk, the fathom folk, who are all sea creatures from folktales such as sirens and kelpies and sea witches, who are all living in this polluted water around the city. The main character in here is a half siren who seems to live above the water, and they're promoted to be some kind of guard and hope that through this promotion they can help their people down in the water. But their plans are put in jeopardy when a water dragon and fathom folk princess is exiled to the city and put under her watch. Revolution is brewing all around them and extremists end up attacking. Tensions are rising all around, and these two characters have to decide how far they will go for their people, or if maybe the city should just be left to drown. Honestly, having talked about this one sounds really interesting to me. I don't have quite the obsession with water-based novels that my boyfriend seems to, so he just really jumped on this one, but it sounds really interesting, so maybe I will get to this one a little bit sooner than I expected. That is Fathom Folk by Eliza Chan. And the last book on this list is The Crowfolk by Mark Stay. This is set in rural Kent during the Second World War, where a girl in this village realises she has inherited her mother's witchcraft abilities. And she realises this at the perfect time because the Crowfolk are coming for her mother's witch journal, and they are led by the Pumpkinhead, which sounds incredible. Faye, the girl who has just learned she is a witch, now must use her new powers along with the help of two bickering witches and a lot of bell ringing to try to save the village from demonic forces. This sounds like it could be quite a cozy one, even though there is a reasonable threat in here. It sounds like it's going to be quite funny. I've really been enjoying these period fantasies recently, especially because a lot of the time they're written in quite a witty way that reminds me of someone like Austen. So I'm excited to give this one a try. This probably isn't one I would have picked out myself, partly because I'm just not a big war fan in my novels, but it does sound very intriguing, and I'm glad that Chris noticed this one where I might not have done. So that is The Crowfolk by Mark Stay. So here are all of our new books. I'm very excited. It's okay, they're safe. Please let me know if you have read any of these and enjoyed them. Let me know your thoughts and if there are any that you think I should read especially soon. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. And I will see you very soon in another video. Bye bye.